Hello everyone, and God bless. This is Father Michael, with another episode of Living Orthodox, and today's reflection is actually on the passion of lust. Now, before we get started, please be sure to like, share, and subscribe for more content, and hit the bell notification so that you get notified of when new videos come out, because YouTube is silly that way, and really, I guess that's how they try to expand on their services, but it just makes everything difficult. Also, the link in the description for Father John's GoFundMe fundraiser for him moving out to Grand Prairie to take over his parish out there with his wife, my sister, Mateuszka Maria. So please keep them in your prayers, and be sure to share their GoFundMe. So with that said, let's get into the topic. So many of the Holy Fathers hold that in the pre-fallen world, in the Garden of Eden, of course, death didn't exist at this time. Death is the absence of life, just as evil is the absence of good, and ultimately it's the result of the moving away from God, right? It's just like darkness. There is no such thing as darkness as a substance. Darkness is the absence of light. So we have to realize that sin is the result of man detaching himself from God, right? It's the result of the fall, which, of course, the fall happens because they partake of the fruit of the knowledge of good and evil. And in doing so, they transgressed against the commandment God gave them, and by doing that, they walk away from God. So, what do we understand from this? Well, the Holy Fathers say that unless this had happened, Adam and Eve would have lived like brother and sister. And of course, once they attained this knowledge through the partaking of the tree of the knowledge of good and evil, they perceived that they were naked, and so they sought to cover themselves. And so now we have the issue of sex and hunger. Now, sex and hunger, even though they are not what was originally in the natural order for God's creation, they are not evil. So let me clarify, because you get these people out there who hear one thing and they run off to the races with a bunch of assumptions. They don't even listen to the rest of the video, and then they end up making foolish arguments. Neither sex nor hunger are evil so long as they are exercised within God-established boundaries. We can all agree that food isn't evil. We need it to survive. Sex isn't evil. We need to have children. But it has to be within the bounds that God established, right? We should never eat in excess. We shouldn't fornicate in excess or at certain times, like prior to receiving Holy Communion. We should be abstaining the night before. So the Saturday and the Sunday, we should not, we shouldn't be engaging in that practice after. It's just part of being temperate and being self-restrained. Because if you can't be self-restrained on 1 or 2 days, then what other issues are we going to struggle against? That said, we also need to have children. Children are a good thing. Children are beautiful. They are also a way for parents to refine themselves and to purify their souls, to overcome their passions. But they're not evil things. That being said, just as hunger is capable of becoming gluttony, sex can easily become lust, especially when it is committed outside of the God-established boundaries, which is within marriage, and which, of course, excludes anything that is unnatural, or, in other words, sodomous. And, of course, this is the month of the Pride of Sodomy, so this is something to bear in mind, that sodomy can be also committed by people who are not necessarily attracted to the same sex. So we have to be mindful that we shouldn't be abusing our bodies in ways that are not within the natural created order. So Gluttony says that her child is at war with chastity. This comes from St. John of the Ladder. Now, just as the ear of chastity, like an ear of grain or an ear of corn, grows from the seed of sweat and fasting, so satiety, in other words, to be overly satisfied, to be overly indulgent in comfort, yields the burning of lust. So if the stomach is meek and hungry, shameful thoughts struggle to enter into the soul. Right? It's essentially like the stomach becomes like a barren desert, undisturbed by any thought, any fantasy. And this is something that St. Isaac the Syrian talks about in his ascetical homilies. He who wishes to defeat, truly, the demon of fornication. I get this question all the time. How do I overcome the demon of fornication? How do I overcome my addiction to online content, for the bad stuff? How do I overcome self-abuse? How do I overcome lust? If you want to overcome the demon of fornication, for one, don't try to play with it. Don't engage it in rebuttal or thought. And also, I've seen this myself, and just talking to people, a lot of them tend to overeat or will start eating to try to avoid committing those sins. That is like a man trying to put a fire out by pouring oil on it. And that's actually something that St. John also says in the Divine Ladder, the Ladder of Divine Ascent. A man who tries to fight lust with gluttony is like a man trying to put out a fire by pouring oil on it. It's only going to accelerate the flames. Luxury is a fuel for unreasonable lust, right? And when the Holy Fathers say unreasonable, it means the abandonment of reason, the abandonment of the rational powers of the soul to maintain governance over one's actions. Hence, all the fornications come, right? Hence, adulteries for hunger, for a hungry belly, a hungry stomach, or one which has just used enough food. Cannot really generate lust, not on the spiritual physiological level. And yes, the soul and the body are very closely interwoven. You're not a soul trapped in a meat suit. I've heard many Protestants unfortunately have this idea that your body's evil, but your soul is good. No, it all is interconnected. It's all part of the whole man. The whole man has to be purified. The whole man has to struggle, has to wrestle, has to bear the cross, has to run the race, fight the good fight, buffet their bodies. These are all things St. Paul says in the first epistle to the Corinthians, by the way. So I'm not sure why many of them go, oh, well, the passions are not in the Bible. Well, they are. I had somebody try to argue with me on that online the other day. Oh, where in the Bible are passions? Lust, greed? Come on, we're using a catch-all term to describe all these things that lead to sin, right? That these passions become sins when they're put into reality, when we commit actions that bring them forward, right? Including looking at someone in lust, right? That is still an action that makes it very real and in the heart. And from the abundance of the heart, evils come, right? Out of the abundance of the heart, the mouth speaks. It's not what goes into a man's mouth that makes him unclean, but what comes out. But this doesn't just simply mean spoken words. This also means actions and where our eyes are wandering to, what is happening in here. So it is clear that, when we look at this, and maybe some illustrations that I have written down here from the Holy Fathers will help. That which produces unseemly lust, which has been relaxed through luxury. And just as land which is very moist and wet through and through generates worms, well, that which is free of excess moisture bears abundant fruits, even if it has not been cultivated. The same is true for us, right? It is clear that the antidote to lust is in fact fasting. Many people say, how do I defeat it? How do I defeat it? Most of them have not bothered to try fasting. Most of them have not exercised some form of abstinence when it comes to their stomach because they think it's unconnected. They've developed this dualistic perspective. It's not. Try it. Try fasting. Ask your spiritual father, ask your priest, your father confessor for something to help. In all reality, they should be doing this. I know many people like to frown upon the rudder. Many people like to frown upon the exomologaterion, which is available from Uncut Mountain Press, linked to the description in the description below. The exomologaterion, in my opinion, is predominantly, at least if you're a beginner in the faith, best left to priest. And priests should be using it, but lay people can use it as well. It can really help you to flesh out your confessions and to assess yourself. But one of the remedies given for penances for people who struggle with lust is to eat dry foods and to fast, to deny themselves excess, and even on some days to forego eating in certain extreme circumstances, because this can help to mitigate the passion of lust, because it subdues the body. The body wanes thin, so that the soul might wax fat. And every ascetic, every saint, never skipped out on the fasting. The whole point, by the way, and why myself, Father Peter Hears, many others say to follow the saints, is because, as Metropolitan Neophytus of Morphu said, playing on the words of St. Paul in Corinthians, the saints judge us. What does he mean by this? The saints judge us by the fact that they set the standard for us that we should be measuring to. We should be measuring to this. If we want to follow after Christ, let us take the examples of holy men and women who've succeeded in fighting the good fight. So, therefore, let us not fatten the body. Right? This is what a lot of the Holy Fathers are saying. Let us not fatten the body. He who throws food down into the belly is just like someone who throws it or tosses it down a drain, and does so without harming himself. That's the difference. While one does harm to himself, the other one doesn't do harm to himself. It's certainly wrong to throw food down the drain, but the one who just tosses it into his stomach indiscriminately and just eats and snacks just because he wants to and he needs a taste, this person does great harm to themselves. So there it is, dear ones. The antidote to lust is a very simple one. It's to fast, but fasting without prayer is just a diet. Make sure you have a good prayer rule. Make sure your spiritual father is assigning you to do prostrations. It's okay to ask him. And if your spiritual father isn't penanceing you, if there's some serious sins going on, if you're not getting better, sit down and try to talk with him about it. And if that doesn't work, there's the bishop, there's monasteries. Do what you can, because ultimately, we don't believe in blind obedience. We're obedient to Christ, and we are obedient to those who are obedient to Christ, because that's the relation right there. If we're obedient to them, then we are certainly being obedient to Christ. It's a lot easier to be obedient to a spiritual father than it is to be obedient to God, because God's standards are much higher. This is a way in which God has granted to us to be able to attain salvation and to be able to cut off our self-will. That's why obedience is so highly praised by people like St. Paisios. Obedience helps us to remove our self-will, and in turn helps us to overcome these insidious passions. So thank you for tuning in, everyone. God bless you all. Have a wonderful night. I'm going to go put my children to bed because they're refusing to sleep. So God bless you all, and I'll catch you in the next one.